Stories from the home front bright, keeping victory shining light on the victory home front.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to On the Victory Homefront. So you might be already thinking, hey, Jamie, there was no episode last week. And yes, you got me. There was no episode last week. I'm a one-woman show. I do the research, I record it, I edit it on top of everything that I do here on our homestead and other aspects of my life, as well as taking care of my son. So sometimes, I really have to prioritize things, and that means having to step back from the podcast for a week here and there. I will always try to make up for it if I'm able to, but otherwise, you will see me. I'm not going to stop. It's just I've got a lot going on. And so I do apologize if you happened to miss me last week, and if you did, thank you for missing me. So this episode's going to be a little different because I really don't know what I'm going to talk about. And the reason I don't know what I'm going to talk about is not because I don't have things to talk about. I have a lot of things to talk about. And usually I pick the subject depending on what is really pulling at me that week, or what is really inspiring me, or maybe something that I have seen in the news or in the world that triggers something about the home front that makes me want to talk about it, or go, oh, I want to talk about that. Oh, this would make a great episode. And I literally have probably about 20 episodes on my phone, but none of them are really pulling at me right now. And so that makes it tough to choose. And then I feel like you're not going to get like the best episode from me because I'll just be like, meh, meh, meh. And I don't want to be like that. I want you to feel the passion coming through your phone, through your computer, through whatever you're listening to or watching me on. And because I am incredibly passionate about this time in our history. It also is hard because we just came off of a 5-part series, right? And it was a serious series, and it was the battle for morale. And so right away, I didn't want to jump into another like, oh, this was tough and this was something we had to deal with, because 100% there are a lot, and half of my episodes are probably that. But I really kind of wanted to come onto doing a lighter episode this week. I think that's good, right? I think the negative and the positive. Look, I'm inspired by the positive on the home front, period. And I think most people are. But like I said during the series, I need to show all aspects. If I'm going to teach about the home front, if you are going to fully understand what the greatest generation had to do or went through, I have to talk about all aspects of it, even parts of it that are uncomfortable or sad or can make you maybe angry or confused or unsure or really make you think. And I need to touch on all those things because that's what this podcast is all about. It's about teaching the home front. I want you to want to know. I want you to want to learn, and I want you to understand that time in our history. And then maybe you'll find a passion in it. Maybe you'll find inspiration in it. Maybe you'll learn a lesson from it, or something about yourself, or something you want to bring into your life, because that's basically what I am doing personally as well, is that I am inspired by this time in our history. I'm inspired by what the home front had to do, and was willing to do at that time in our history during a very unsure, chaotic, scary, sad, angry time in our history. And we can see that throughout, modern history as well. I think that maybe a lot of people are feeling that way now for different aspects. Obviously, I guess we're kind of in a war, but we're not in a world war. And it's definitely still different. I'm not going to compare the apples to oranges, but that's what this podcast is for. It's to inspire, to teach. Uh, mm, yeah, my throat's going to be all scratchy because I have terrible allergies here in this area that I have not adjusted to. So you will see me drink water. But you know what? Maybe you'll like this format more. Normally, I am creating a script and I'm reading a script, and that is what you're getting from me. But this one, I'm kind of freelancing more, and I'm hoping actually to freelance more because I think you'll get more of me, more of my character, the way, I don't know. Maybe you'll like that more. Maybe it'll help you connect more. Maybe it'll help you want to watch more of my podcast. So I just thought I would just start this episode and just see where it goes. Like I said, there are a lot of aspects or things that encourage me on what I'm going to talk about. And I happen to be kind of in the middle of several things. And so I'm like, I don't know which one I want to pull at, which one I want to talk about. And so this might just be a diary episode, which I'm going to do every once in a while, because another reason for this podcast is to share how I bring in aspects of the World War II home front into my everyday life. And now that we're on a homestead and we're building a homestead, I already brought in as much as I could of the lessons I learned, of the skills I learned of the World War II home front when I was living in town. But now, living in the country, I really can see a lot of parallels of the things that they did to what I'm trying to do, to what I'm bringing in. Now, mine's a choice, and theirs wasn't, but that was another main reason to do this podcast, is I wanted to share what I was doing and how I was bringing it in and how it was going and what I was learning from it. So yeah, this is probably going to end up being a diary episode, but I hope you'll still stick with me through the whole thing, because I probably will talk about aspects of the World War II history, because that's what this is about. That's what I'm about. That's what I try to live. And I want your opinion, or I want you to maybe answer a question or two, which I already have in my mind, and hopefully I ask it before my episode is over. So currently, where I'm at on our homestead is we are starting the harvest. So I am starting to pick things off of my little victory garden. I am calling it little because it's little in comparison to what we are working towards. But it is definitely big in comparison to, I think, what maybe a lot of people who have gardens may have. Now, not in this area. I see my size garden in a lot of yards in this area, and I love that. I have never seen so many gardens in any other place that I've lived. I've lived in several places. We moved quite a bit in my life for my husband's job, something they would have done during the World War II years. You would have moved for war jobs. So my husband, for his career, we've moved several times. But this area where we're at now, I've never seen so many gardens before, and it's very refreshing. And every time we drive somewhere, if I'm not the one driving, I'm just always looking for gardens to see what they look like, to see what they're growing, to see if they even have one. And so it's been really refreshing to see all the gardens in this area. And mine, by everybody else's standards here in this area, is not big. It's probably average size, but it's the biggest one I've ever had. So I am starting to harvest. I am really focusing only on plants and vegetables that I know we would eat. And I think that's really vital. And they would have done the same thing during World War II in their victory garden. They would have only planted what their family was going to use and maybe what was hard for them to come by in the area. So, for example, in my area here, it is very hard for me to find organic sweet peppers. And I'm really big on organic because my son is very sensitive, first off. And I really go by the Dirty Dozen. If it's on the Dirty Dozen, we're only buying organic. If I can't get it organic, we don't eat it. So I did plant quite a few sweet peppers, but I'm learning I didn't plant enough. So far I've harvested 8. No, I've probably harvested 10 because I did use 2 for dinner already. And then the 8 I just harvested, I just cleaned, I chopped up, and they're in my freezer. So I can use them anytime I need to bring sweet peppers into a recipe. But that's very, very hard for me to find in this area. And when I do find it, it's very expensive, or they are very expensive. So that's just an example of something that I am growing in my victory garden. I'm only growing things that make sense. And I'm learning this year if I need to plant more of something or maybe not plant something at all. So I did plant peas this year. We planted sweet peas. It was fun, but I don't see me planting them in the near future. For me, it's just worth going to go buy a bag of frozen organic peas because you have to plant an insane amount to get anything that is worthwhile of the time and the space that you are using in your garden. So I know people, actually, there's a family member that they love peas. So they plant an obscene amount of peas and they spend all that time breaking open the pods and getting their peas. And I know other people that I follow on social media, they do the same thing. But for us, it's not worth it. So when you have limited resources or time or space, you really have to utilize what works best for your family. They would have done the same thing in World War II. What works best for them? What makes the most sense for them to do for their family? And so that's what I'm learning from my victory garden right now. My tomatoes are coming in. I'm getting a good amount. They're all kind of small though. And I think I know why. And so I'm learning from that. I'm learning what we're going to do next year. And next year, my garden is going to be massive. So I think I will be mentally ready for that. And I have no doubt, now I've not found any proof of this, but I have no doubt that as the war went on, the bigger the backyard victory gardens got, the more victory gardens would pop up. Now that I do know. I do know the numbers. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I do know that victory gardens, there are more and more as the war went on. I believe 1944 had the largest number of victory gardens. So why not 1945? Because we were going into the war. Well, the war in Europe ended in May in 1945. And part of the country, a good part of the northern part of the country, we're still planting at that time. People didn't really start their seeds indoors unless they had like a greenhouse. So they would have planted directly into the ground. So that was still planting time. And if they saw that the war in Europe ended during planting time, they're not going to plant anymore. So at least some of them probably weren't going to plant anymore. They're like, yep, the war is over. The war is ending. We were still in the Pacific, but the war is ending and we probably don't have to go this full extent anymore. And I would imagine that would be in a lot of mindsets. I think it'd be in a lot of mindsets now. So you did see a drop off of victory gardens in 1945. That makes sense. So I do know in 1944 was the largest number of victory gardens. It was also the largest number of people canning their own food because they had all this food, they had all this produce. You're going to make it last. That's why my peppers are in the freezer. I wanted to make them last. And yes, I would can peppers too with onions. So that's something else that I will probably do with my produce. So I'm learning from this. I'm really glad that I started off small because it would be really overwhelming. I'm already really overwhelmed in some areas and I have a small garden. So smaller garden, but I'm really enjoying it and I'm really learning a lot from it. This is the first year that I've grown a lot of these plants from seed. So to see how well my garden is doing right now, and I'm hoping that I'm able to add some photos onto this episode, which is something I've never done. Well, I have done in some episodes, but I'm not really good at it. I have not sat down to figure out all the tricks and things I could do to make my podcast more visually appealing. But I will get there when things slow down in my personal life. So I'm still unpacking to this day. I finally got my son's room fully unpacked of boxes. We've been here, it'll be a year next month. But it's just, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of moving parts in life. There's a lot of moving parts in a homestead and your home front. So, that's why every once in a while I might miss an episode. So I'm sorry, but please hang in there and bear with me. And please keep coming back because I enjoy having you to come and listen to everything, that I might be sharing. So another thing that I'm currently dealing with here on our home front is I'm really struggling trying to find community. Community is something that I think is very important for people to have. And I'm not talking friends. You can make friends in your community. It doesn't necessarily have to be a community of friends. I mean, obviously you'd want to be pleasant with everybody, but a local community is incredibly important for everybody to have. Now, where we lived before we moved here, it was fairly easy for me to find community. Now, I did have to put myself out there and I did have to get involved with things. And I did start a group out there and I met some of the most fabulous friends I could ever wish for. So I did have to put myself out there and I had the opportunity and availability to do so. And not to mention, it was a highly growing area. It's one of the fastest growing areas this year in the US, and it's always been towards the top of that list. And so there were a lot of new people moving in that were looking for community because they were leaving maybe their hometowns or they moved a lot for their job like we did for my husband's job. Excuse me. And so when you move to an area that has a lot of movement, a lot of people coming in, I think it's fairly easier to find community. The home front during World War II, they would have had the same thing. There was a lot of moving during World War II, believe it or not, because there were a lot of war jobs opening and war production that needed people. So it would go out there and be like, hey, we've got war jobs. You're going to have to move here. Detroit is one of them. We did talk about that a little bit in the 5-part series because then housing became an issue, but community would have been easier to have been found because there were large amounts of people moving to an area looking for community they were new. Well, we moved to an area that nobody really is moving here. I mean, I'm sure there are some, but it's not the large numbers of the people that were moving to where we just moved from. So maybe there's a family here and a family there, a person here, but it's not this large number of people. So most of the people that live here have lived here and they already have their community, which makes it harder for me to find community. So that is something that I am having a hard time finding here on our home front. And I don't have the availability to put myself out there like I did before. I'm a homemaker who is running a homestead, who is taking care of her adult autistic son, and I do a lot. I am on my feet all day long, all day long, and I don't have the availability to put myself out there. It is hard for me to maybe volunteer somewhere. To work outside of the home would be harder on my son. One of the reasons we wanted to move here and to have this lifestyle is for me to be home with my son. So I don't have the opportunity to really meet people out here. So finding community has been tough. I'm not giving up on it, but it is something that I think every person should have. Now, during the World War II years, community was huge. It was vital and it was needed. It was needed because everybody depended on each other. So there's more than one way how a community is formed or found. And another way that community is found is through shared experiences or a shared hardship, such as war. So everybody was in it together during the home front. It was vital. It was important. It was the only way the home front was going to be able to be successful in everything that it did for the war front and for us to win the war. So it was a shared experience throughout the whole country that people could get behind. And there were more opportunities to do stuff for the war effort. You could participate in the USO. You could knit your bits. We will get to that in another episode, but you could knit your bit. You could volunteer at the Red Cross. You could sell victory bonds. You could host things for the war effort. There were massive amounts of things that you could do in your community to be a part of that community and to bring the community together. It was a shared experience. It was a shared moment in time that really allowed community to shine through. So that's one of the reasons why community was so strong back then. Not to mention, it was also dependent on for the women who went and worked at a war job or at any job, really. Women were already working. Do not be confused with that. There were already women in the workforce. The thing that changed is that there were positions that were not open to women to fill. So positions opened to women that were not open to women before. I remember looking at the numbers, and I can't remember numbers in my head very well because I just jumble them up. There were millions of women already in the workforce. I'm not kidding. There were. But we saw a boom. It was the biggest boom in like the short amount of time. It was 6 million women went to these positions that maybe were not open to women before. And so that is, a crucial thing. So you have all these women that are going outside their home to work, but a lot of them already have children and they have to run the home, especially if the husband/dad went off to war. So she's running the house. She's raising her children. She's trying to grow a victory garden because she needs to feed her children and she wants to make sure they have food. And she's going to a war job. So community was vital. There were women who were staying home that maybe didn't want to or need to go get a war job. They would help the women who were doing the war jobs. They would help pick up the children. They would probably help with the garden, 100%. It was very much a community effort. And it was shared in neighborhoods, just like you would see the kids sharing like a bike. The women, the men, they all shared things to help each other out in the neighborhood. Now, was it all perfect? No, we know that. We know it was not perfect. But community was still incredibly important during that time in our history. And I think it's incredibly important now. I did see that community slightly after 9/11. It felt more like we were part of something together. Unfortunately, I do think that a tragedy jumpstarts it. It doesn't have to be the reason for it, but it jumpstarts it. And I don't want a tragedy for me to find a community here. I'm just hoping that I'm able to find community. And I'm sure it's going to take me some time. But it is something that I think everybody needs. And even if maybe you haven't realized it yet in your life, and maybe you're like, well, I got friends and I got family, and 100% I have that too. But when you move out of an area, like so many people did during World War II, they relocated for war jobs, for whatever reason, because they were stationed somewhere. Having people close by and around you is important. And I'm hoping that we're able to find it here. Yes, I do have neighbors and we know them. We've met them. We've introduced ourselves and we talk to them, periodically. But to find more people in your community, I think is really, really important. So I have a Homefront challenge for you all. And that is this week, I want you to meet one of your neighbors. So I think I'm going to do that. You tell me if you like that idea. I'm going to do different segments. I'm working on segments in my head for this show, like maybe a ration challenge or did you know? And we'll talk about food or a food item that came about during World War II and why it was important. But I'm going to do little segments and hopefully I'll have fun little music. And again, that means I have to sit down and figure out this platform, which I don't know if I'll have time for anytime soon. But we're going to do that. We're going to do different segments. So we'll do challenges. And your challenge this week, that's my terrible drum roll, is to meet a neighbor. Meet a neighbor to start forming community. So I'm sure you all know plenty of people in your town, especially if you've not moved and you've grown up there. I'm sure you have community, but do you know the people on your street? Do you know the person next to you? Maybe you do, because in some areas, no one's really relocating much. But in the area that I just moved from, it was constant turnaround. And we did know one neighbor, and he was amazing, and he was awesome. And he would come over and help us, and we would help him. And this was in Texas. And even during early 2021, what did they call it? Snow-nado. We had like a week of freezing temperatures, and we lost power. We lost power for days. And we were more prepared. And so we were handing out things to our neighbors for them to keep warm. Our one neighbor just had a baby. So we gave them a safe heater that they could use in their home to keep at least one room warm. And then there was another gentleman who was kitty corner from us, and we were helping him also with power. And that's why it's important. You should know people in your community, because should something go wrong, you can help each other out. Or, it doesn't even have to go wrong. You can just notice like, hey, I want to help this person out. Maybe they could help me out. Hey, I'm leaving for the weekend. Can you come feed my chickens? That kind of thing. So your challenge this week is to meet one of your neighbors. Maybe go bring them over like a home-baked good or something from your garden, or none of that. Just go over and just say, hi, I want to introduce myself. But that's your challenge this week. All right, my friends, I have a busy day because we are going to an apple orchard, my son and I, to pick up some apples so that we can put apples on our shelves throughout the winter months. So let me know what you think about this kind of episode. I mean, obviously, future episodes will have more of a subject that I will talk about with numbers and facts. But if you like me freelancing more than reading a script, let me know. If you like the idea of segments, let me know. And if you have an idea for future episodes of On the Victory Homefront, I would love to hear them as well. And last but not least, I am looking to interview people. Yes, I am. I would love to interview people that have stories of the Homefront, whether you lived through them, or your mother lived through them, or father and passed down stories, or your grandparents, or you just know of something really interesting in your area on the Homefront. Be sure to reach out to me. I would love to interview you or anybody else. I've got some ideas for people I plan to interview that I am reaching out to this week. So fingers crossed. I do have a small following, so I feel like a lot of people might go, well, I don't know if it's worth my time. But you know what? It's those moments. It's reaching out to these small podcasts such as mine to help them grow that's going to make it worth it. So, you know what I'm going to ask you to do? I'm going to ask you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you haven't, and share with your friends and family. Help my podcast grow. Show that we have a strong following and that it is worth someone's time to come on and be interviewed on the Victory Homefront. So, my friends, I am heading out to do some apple picking. Well, more like apple picking up. But I will be on next week with a whole new episode. So just remember, my friends, until next time, that victory is in the everyday. I'll see you soon.